Hey, what is going on guys? RvzStealth here, and in today's video, we're going to be updating the top lane tier list for 7.18. So this is going to be the patch that Worlds will be played on. So I think because of that, I'm going to make a tier list for every single role in this patch. So be sure to look out for other roles if you are interested in those as well. But with that being said, guys, let's get started. So starting it off in the tier 1 for this patch and moving up quite a bit here is going to be Fiora. So Fiora received a really nice buff in this patch to her ultimate, and this is what's propelling her back into the tier 1 for 7.18. So Fiora is a champion that in the meta right now, she actually doesn't fit in too bad. There's a lot of top laners being played right now that Fiora does great into. For example, Maokai, Cho'Gath, Camille, Jax, Gnar. There's just a lot of pretty favorable matchups for Fiora right now, and because she's getting this buff to her ultimate in this patch to where she now gains that movement speed again whenever she uses her ultimate on the target, it's just a great buff for Fiora because I think this is the nerf that kind of took her out of the meta, and with them putting that back on her ultimate now, I just think she's going to be a great pick for 7.18. With that movement speed coming back onto her ultimate, her team fighting is going to be much stronger. She's never going to be like one of the strongest team fight top laners. Her kit is more built for that split pushing, but because they did add this back onto her ultimate, it is going to allow her to stick onto her target a lot better during team fights and just in 1v1 scenarios. So it will allow her to chase down those kills. When I was playing Fiora, I played her a few times after that nerf, and there's so many scenarios to where I just wouldn't be able to catch up to the opponent and they just end up getting away because I just wouldn't have that movement speed. So this is just a huge change to Fiora for this patch, and she's going to be a very strong pick in 7.18. So for Fiora's matchups, I did touch on this briefly, but champions like Galio, Kled, Cho'Gath, Camille, a lot of these champions that have a telegraph CC ability, Fiora can do very well into, and she also just does very well into pretty much any tank matchup because once she gets 2 or 3 items, a tank champion is not going to be able to deal with a Fiora in a split push, and that's where she can really take over the game. So I think that she's got a lot of great matchups in this patch right now, so I'd be looking to pick up Fiora in 7.18. Next in the tier 1 here is going to be Singed. Now, I think Singed is probably the most underrated top laner right now in this patch. There's a few different reasons for it. The first one is that the buffs he got a few patches ago to his passive and his W just make him a much better pick right now in the top lane, and it just makes him a much better champion overall. With Singed's new passive, his trading in the laning phase is much stronger because what you can do with Singed is you can just walk up to the opponent with your E, you can fling them, and you're gonna get that movement speed which will allow you to kite away, and it just makes it very hard for a lot of these melee top laners to actually trade against the Singed in the laning phase. Come team fighting with Singed and with this new passive, it pretty much makes him unkiteable. If you got Righteous Glory or you take Ghost on Singed and you're also getting a lot of your passive procs off on your teammates and on your opponents, then you're just not going to be able to kite this champion. His zoning potential in team fights is very good. You can just get onto the back line super easily and you can just zone the enemy AD carry off or whoever's fed on their team. So I just think that Singed's main problem before is the fact that he could get kited pretty easily and it was hard for him to do well in team fights, but I don't really think that's an issue for him anymore, like with Righteous Glory and with his new passive. And then for Singed matchups in the top lane, a lot of ranged champions can do pretty well against him in the laning phase. I found that Kennen is a pick that has great success against Singed because you got great poke with Kennen in the laning phase and you can really easily just poke the Singed down, and then he's not really going to be able to proxy farm and he's not going to be able to walk up to the wave and use his poison on it. So ranged matchups he does struggle against, but most melee matchups, as you can see here, especially against a lot of the tank top laners, he just absolutely destroys in 7.18. The third champion in the tier 1 for this patch is going to be Jace. So in my opinion, if you know how to play this champion well in the early game, if you know how to really abuse his oppressive laning phase, then Jace is probably the best top laner that you can play in 7.18. If you are looking for someone to watch on like how to play Jace and you want to know how to play his laning phase, then I would recommend looking up Longju's top laner Khan, because he's known as one of the best Jaces in the world. His Jace is one of his most most played champions in solo queue, and it's also one of his most played champions in the competitive scene. So look up Khan if you are thinking about playing Jace or you want some more tips on how to play the champion, because the way you can play this champion's laning phase and the way you can really just get ahead and snowball is some of the best for any top laner. The reason why I'm saying to like go watch Khan or watch some other top laners that are really good at Jace is, in order to have success on the champion, you really need to know how to manage waves in the laning phase and how to zone the enemy from CS and really gain an advantage in the laning phase by just using your strong ability to all in and using your ranged advantage. If you're just shoving the enemy under tower the whole laning phase and you're not really poking them or zoning them from CS, then the pick isn't going to be super successful for you. But if the enemy makes a small mistake in the laning phase and you can get a freeze off at your tower so that they have to walk up and be vulnerable to a gank or vulnerable to your all in, then it's very easy for you to get ahead with Jace in the laning phase and just start to take over the game. Now for Jace's matchups in this patch, I don't think he really has too many hard counters. If you do take a look here, you're going to notice that he does struggle against a few tank picks like the Maokai, like the Scion, the Malphite, but I think that the reason to why he struggles a lot against those picks is, number one, he is going to get outscaled come the mid to late game by a lot of these tank champions, so you do have to make sure you are having a good early game on Jace. And then number two, I feel like a lot of people are just going to build the same thing every game on Jace, whereas if you're up against these tankier top laners, you don't want to build like the Yomus and Dustblade on Jace, because that's not going to do well against people stacking armor. You're going to want to go for like a Blade of the Ruined King, Last Whisper pretty early on as Jace in order for you to win those tankier matchups and be relevant in the side lane. So I don't think those win rates and the fact that he loses against those top laners is really that big of a deal. I think the main reason for it is because people just don't adjust their builds depending on the matchup. Next in the tier 1 here is going to be Akali. So I think that other than Fiora in this patch, if you're looking for a really good snowbally top lane champion that can just really take over a game and just keep killing the opponent over and over again, I think that Akali is one of the best snowbally picks for solo queue. Her matchups right now in the top lane are very favorable. There's a lot of picks being played in solo queue like Yasuo, like Nasus, Gnar, Camille that Akali can do very well against in the laning phase. She isn't as easily exploited in the laning phase now either. One of Akali's main weaknesses before it was that she was just way too weak in the early game and she couldn't really do too much pre-6, but with Doran Shield and with her new passive, it does allow her to sustain until level 6 fairly easily, and then once she does hit that level 6, she can really look to go for an all-in on the opponent and just get that snowball going in the laning phase. Now for Akali's matchups in 7.18, Pantheon's a pretty good pick against her. Singed also does well against the champion. Teemo can do pretty well in the laning phase, but most other picks like the Yasuo, like the Gnar, the Camille have a very hard time against Akali in the laning phase. A lot of these picks that do rely on hitting a CC ability in lane to really hit their combo or do a lot of damage from their combo, Akali can do great against because of her Shroud. For example, if Yasuo has his tornado ready, you just put down your Shroud as Akali, you wait that out, and then after that you just look to all in the Yasuo. So she does have quite a few good matchups due to her Shroud mechanic, and she can really abuse that in the laning phase. And then to round out the tier 1s for this patch is going to be a mainstay in the tier 1 for a few patches now, and it's Pantheon. So I don't think there's too much to really say about this champion. His laning phase is very strong. He's got one of the strongest laning phases for any top laner. He can very easily just get a lead in the laning phase, and once he does that and once he hits level 6, his roaming potential with his ultimate can just really snowball a game out of control. You can either look to roam mid lane or bot lane with Pantheon, and if you pick up a double kill bot lane and you get your bot lane ahead as well, then it's going to be very hard for you to actually end up throwing that game and end up losing that game. So I just think his kit is great for solo queue. The fact that he's great in the early game and he also has the potential to roam makes him a great pick for solo queue. So for his matchups in the top lane, he struggles a little bit against champions that can negate his poke, or against these tankier top lane picks that can start the door and shield, and it's kind of harder for him to really abuse his strong laning phase against those champions. So Sion can do pretty well against Pantheon, Maokai, Cho'Gath, these champions that either do have sustain in the laning phase or do have like a built-in shield in their kit can do pretty well against him. But he does great against Fiora, he does great against Akali, Camille, Renekton. There's a lot of picks that Pantheon does well into, and with Fiora getting buffed in this patch now, there's probably going to be more blind pick Fiora players in 7.18, and Pantheon is one of the best counters and one of the few counters that Fiora does have in the laning phase. And then for the tier 2 picks for this patch, these are still the strong champions. They are in the A tier. Now the only champion here I think that got changed in this patch is Jarvan, and Jarvan did get a nerf to his W shield. It's going to be quite a lot weaker in this patch if you are building a lot of health on Jarvan, because it did scale with a % of his max HP, and that got nerfed a little bit in 7.18. I still think he is going to be a strong pick in the top lane, but he's not going to be god tier like he was in the previous patches. And then for the tier 3 champions in this patch, these are the viable picks. They're average, they're not super strong, but they're also not super weak. So if you do have good knowledge on these champions, you can still have pretty good success with them in solo queue. But a lot of them, you're not going to want to blind pick them every game. They do have quite a few counters in the laning phase, or at least most of them do have some pretty known counters in the laning phase. So unless you are very practiced on these champions, it's going to be hard for you to have consistent success on them in 7.18. The tier 1 and the tier 2 champions just outclass a lot of these picks, so they're still pretty good, but they're not the best if you are looking to climb consistently. And then for the tier 4 champions, I'm adding in a tier 4 for this patch because I've never really had a tier to where the champions are just weak and they're not really worth playing. I've always had like tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3, and then tier 3 being the lowest, which was like viable and average. So I thought I'd add in a tier 4, and these champions are just going to be weak. They're not really worth playing right now in this patch over the other champions, and I would just stay away from them unless you are a one trick on one of these champions. Then you're just not going to have consistent success, and you're not going to climb consistently in 7.18 with these champions. So that is going to be it for this top lane tier list for 7.18. Eventually I will have a tier list out for every single role in this patch, so be sure to look out for those. If you guys did enjoy the video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you have yet to already. So thanks for watching, guys. Have an awesome day, and I will see you in my next video.